Welcome back to Why Blank Lost for Survivor 45. I'm David Bloomberg, and I am absolutely stuffed. Not from a rotisserie chicken, but from pretty much everything else. Thanksgiving weekend just provided. Uh,
Yes.
Joining me as always is, of course, my co-host, Jessica Lewis. I don't know if she's equally stuffed.
Listen, I will just say that Thanksgiving is the only time that it is incredibly appropriate to eat
Mm,
pie with Coolip for breakfast. So, that's just something you should do.
I don't know that it's the only time, but okay, we'll go with that.
Yes, but it is definitely very filling. It has been very filling. And now I need to get back to not eating so
Yes.
much food in such a short amount of time.
Yes.
But
Go
it's
back
all
to
delicious.
being a survivor.
Right?
Just,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I hope everyone out there had a good Thanksgiving weekend if you celebrate, or
Mm-hmm.
just had a good weekend in general if you don't.
Right.
I got my prediction right about Kendra getting voted out, so that made my weekend even better.
Uh, we, we, I was included in that too.
Yeah, after me, sure,
Oh,
okay.
stop it.
You
Here
know the
we go.
worst. You know the worst part.
What?
I made my draft picks, and apparently I
Mm-hmm.
made them before I finalized my thoughts for the podcast. And I went
Mm.
back and I'm like, all right, I'm going to get 15 points. No, I didn't put Kendra in my draft picks. I don't know why. I didn't go back and update them. So I'm like,
Well, so much for that.
yeah, yeah.
Well, you've lost there, but
But
but you were
gained,
right here.
yes,
So,
gained imaginary points here. That's right. So,
yes, no, you did gain imaginary points.
yes,
But so, yes, we were correct in our
we were
prediction.
correct.
And I am never normally correct. So sorry, Kendra, but I feel like I've been doing better so
Go
far.
you. Go you. We'll see if that stays the same. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Because Jake's gonna win. Just saying.
we'll see if that stays the same. Um, So of course we're a couple days later than usual because of holiday travels and visitors for both of us, but that won't change how we look at what happened this week. We will still follow our usual path, comparing Kendra's games to my rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season 1 and have been updating ever since, using all the non-spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. Now, the one change this week is that when I say interviews, I mean older interviews.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to wait another day or more for Kendra's interviews to come out after the holiday weekend before we got this podcast to you. Um, I think we'll be able to answer our own questions pretty well anyway. I don't foresee any major revelations. I mean, of course, the point of them being major revelations is that you didn't know about them. So I guess, yeah, if there were, then we wouldn't know they were coming. But I'm still predicting there aren't any.
Yes.
We'll have to see if there are anything huge that changes anything we say this week. We will be sure to make note of it next week.
Or we might just tweet about it,
Well,
or make
both.
a TikTok about it.
Yeah, both. But all of the above. All of the above.
That's
Now,
right.
before we get to our discussion of the rules, we always have some other things to discuss from this week's episode, and we'll start with a variant of our usual Bruce Katura content because it took a big turn this week.
Mm.
I mean, first of all, Katura actually had a confessional that wasn't talking about Bruce, so that was,
Wasn't
you
there
know,
like a smidge though? I feel like there was a little bit about Bruce that was
well, I don't
mentioned.
know. At least most of it wasn't. Um, But beyond that, the Reba people told Bruce that Kelly wanted him out and talked about him being too
Mm.
controlling and dragging down her game. And it is true. She did say those things. It is also true that she did intend to vote him out if she could have. But the Reba were making it almost sound like they were helping Bruce. Like, oh, we got rid of Kelly. She wanted you gone.
Mm.
And nothing could have been further from the truth.
Sure.
Um, More important was Bruce's own reaction and his reflection to wonder, was I really like that? Because he said he treats his, he treated Kelly like he treated his own daughter. And so now he was wondering, did he need to go back and talk to his daughter and find out, is he too overbearing?
Mm.
So,
Listen. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, as much as we have joked about Bruce this season, it was rough to see him going through this kind of moment of self doubt, going all the way to his parenting. I
Yeah.
have, I believe he's a great guy. And I'm sure by now he knows that a lot of it is the difference between real life and game. But that's exactly the thing. A daughter would expect a parent to treat them a certain way. A
Mm-hmm.
fellow equal player in a game would not. And that
Right.
is something that people need to remember. Yes, you may be twice as old as some of these people. They may be your kid's age. You may be
Mm-hmm.
3 times as old as these people in some cases, and but you are all equals on Survivor.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that. And like Carolyn was on RHAP with Rob last week, and she staunchly defended Bruce by saying, if you're a dad, you're a dad. If you're a coach, you're a coach. You can't ask someone to turn that off. But I can, and I do, for the game. Yes, be a dad to your own kids. Don't be a dad to someone else's kids.
Yeah, and I will say that that whole scene with Bruce, I really did appreciate the fact that we got the feels, because I
Mm-hmm.
do feel like so much of what we've seen of Bruce hasn't allowed us to appreciate that component of him.
Right.
And I do really love the way that it was structured, that we heard it from Bruce's perspective, but we also heard Drew speaking about Bruce as well. And I love the word. I actually I looked it up because I he said tempestuous, that was the where, Bruce, what, and I just was like, what is this word? And I did look it up because I was fascinated by the use of that term by Drew, because it's such a Drew thing to do, to drop
Yes.
some 50-cent
Big
word in
word.
like
Yes.
that. Yes. But needless to say, I really liked the fact that it was a reflection by someone else about Bruce, and it wasn't in a negative tone. It was just kind of explaining the issues that Bruce was dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
and how he was going to come out of it. So I really did love that we had that moment. And I am hopeful that it allows Bruce to change his game a little bit, because I know, as you said, there's been a lot of, joking about Bruce. I think Bruce is an incredible person, and I do think that he came into the game with this idea of being the fun uncle. I mean, he talked
Yeah.
about that pregame, and he wanted to avoid being the dad. But again, sometimes you can't turn certain parts of yourself off, and we've acknowledged that on this podcast time and time again. But you also do have to like read the room and recognize where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And you might not want to play that role, and you might not want to be that person, and other people might not want you to be that person either. And so I'm curious to see how this develops for Bruce and how he moves through this. And that's why I loved the fact that Drew spoke to that. So I'm hopeful that Drew was maybe foreshadowing a little bit for us as viewers, that like this will be a moment for Bruce to really kind of pick a path. We'll see. But I thought it was a really nice storyline for Bruce, and I did really appreciate the way that it was put together.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a difference between real life and the game.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's good to be a reliable parent for your kid, but your advice is not always sought in the game of equals.
Yeah, and that's certainly fair. And so maybe
So
now he will have that recognition, and as he moves forward in the
yeah,
game.
a little
But I
little little too
also,
little too late. Yeah.
well, but here's the thing I'll say about the Reba component as well. Of course Reba's going to make it all about Kelly, because
Right.
they don't want Bruce to be upset with them. So they're going to be like, we were helping you. We took
Yes.
out your arch nemesis over here, even though you thought she was your number one ally. So it makes sense that they approached it in
Oh
that
yeah.
fashion, because they want to keep Bruce there as a number if they need him. So I can understand why they did that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was great gameplay on their part.
Mm-hmm.
So now, speaking of Bruce, as Caleb noted from the jury, he has been immune for 16 days. He's been
Mm,
vulnerable for one whole vote.
mm-hmm.
Um, and of course, he had his immunity idol even then. The funny thing was in tribal council, Bruce saying this made him a bigger target.
Mm.
Bruce, you were already the biggest target. You couldn't get any bigger. So yeah, don't worry about the target. Keep winning immunity because that's the only way you're going to get away with not using that idol.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting. I
Yeah.
still feel like he's in the final three. I really do.
I mean, it's possible he could win his way there.
Sure.
Now, the one thing that Bruce said that made me shake my head was when he said tribe lines are gone. Yeah, they are for you, Bruce, but not for Reba. Now,
No.
it may speak to what we were just suggesting, Reba hiding their alliance, which is something we'll talk about more as we go through here. But watching from the outside, you just want to yell at the TV or make a TikTok about it or something like that. But yeah, it's like no, tribe lines are not gone. The
Mm-hmm.
Reba are still acting together. But again, it goes back to what you said. This is an explanation as to why all the Reba voted together. And, it's like, oh, they all voted to save you, Bruce, yay.
Mm-hmm. But you would think it should be very apparent to the people who are playing with them that, like, oh, isn't that interesting? Reba all seems to be voting together all the time. Crazy.
You would think so, but they keep getting everybody to vote all together all the time.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
even this vote, they got Bruce and Jake on board.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's easy to get Jake on board. Just say we won't vote for you if you vote this way. But it's yeah. I mean, and that leads to the Reba 4 plus Emily. There were some interesting things happening there because the
Yes.
plus Emily part
Mm-hmm.
seems to be wearing a bit thin. Austin talked about he always tells, quote, my alliance of 4 what's going on, which
Mm-hmm.
told us exactly where Emily sits with him and Drew, which is outside the alliance of 4. And those two also essentially showed that to her outwardly because she came in and she was like, well, what if we voted against, I don't know, D? And
Mm-hmm.
they were like, deer in headlights. They were very much the same way when they got busted looking for an idol by Dee and Julie.
Yes.
I mean, their eyes were as big as the ones Austin ate at the auction. Um, and the pause followed by excuses.
Yeah, the
It just
pause was very uncomfortable. And
yeah,
Emily is very smart
yes,
and clearly saw that and went, yeah, that's not okay. That means I am not in the final three as they promised me.
right.
So she's definitely going to have a bit of an issue moving forward.
Yeah, she saw exactly where she stood. And,
Mm-hmm.
and then in case there was any doubt, when they decided to go against Kendra and Emily was like, well, there are others in the tribe who are bigger threats and less likely to vote for me. So I'd rather go against them. Yeah, they didn't care. The target didn't change. She
Right.
had no say.
Right. Dee, who voiced the same concern, did have a say.
Oh, yes, all the say.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, there is someone else in the Reba Alliance who has no say, and that is Julie.
Mm-hmm.
We saw her pretend to Kendra that she was on the bottom of the alliance so she could get more info. But it turns out she is on the bottom of the alliance.
Mm-hmm.
At least
Yeah.
that's the way it looks to us because there was this little fight between her and Dee about who should go, and she wanted Jake out 2 votes in a row and still
Mm-hmm.
hasn't gotten her way, which
Good. Sorry,
well,
Julie.
yes. But it's really saying, yeah, you truly are on the bottom.
And I don't disagree with that at all. The one thing that I do think is an argument that Austin has been making, and that's the keeping Dee around as kind of a shield. But if we look at who's been doing really awesome in challenges, Julie's been doing really awesome too. So, there's this idea that Dee's doing great, but Julie's doing great. So, does it really come down to that? Austin maybe just needs to step up and do better in challenges. I don't know. I mean, like, stop trying to hide behind people. But
Yes.
no, it is an interesting dynamic when we see these groups of 4 that become so solid and do want to go all the way to the end. But at some point in time, someone is going to try to make a move. Someone's going to make a decision that's going to upset someone. The numbers are really dwindling at this point. So if someone wants to try to flip things, now's really the only shot that they've got to do that. Otherwise, you're
this
just going to
past
be.
vote was, but we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes. I mean, it was pointed out, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was that pointed this out on Twitter, but it was pointed out that because of Final Four fire making, an alliance of 4 truly never has to turn on each other.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, they get to Final Four, someone wins, someone puts someone in fire making, but you know, they don't truly have to vote someone out.
Right. There's no decision
so
that needs to be made to
Right.
remove someone from the game. Yeah.
So as long as everybody in there feels equally comfortable, you're fine.
Right.
And there was a confessional of Julie where she said in a very animated way, I want to go to the end with D. And, you know, I made a TikTok out of this. And as I watched it over and over again, I began to wonder, was this real or was it out of context and she was being sarcastic? Because it was so over the top and she was making faces. And then some commenters said the same thing. If she's being serious as it was portrayed, then it leaves the question of why she would want to go to the end with D when so many other players are saying D will beat just about anyone.
Which I'm kind of fascinated with. I do think that D is doing a great job, but I don't know why she's such a standout and everyone thinks she's going to beat everyone in the end.
I think her social game is generally better. I just think we're not necessarily seeing it.
That's fair.
And also, let's say that Julie and D make it to the end. D is going to say, twice Julie wanted to vote out Jake and I wouldn't let her. And I voted out the people I wanted to. I was the one who was in control. Julie had no control.
Yeah. And then Austin will be like, but it was me.
Yeah, well, who knows where he'll be by then.
I know.
But
they still have 2 idols.
Yes, well, sort of. He gave one to Julie.
Well, right, but I said they. Like I'm looking at the group of 4. If they really are truly,
I know that. Yeah, if they really are truly, we never saw in this episode a reason to show us that he gave it to Julie. Like, if Julie's just going to turn around and give it back to him, why did we even see that? It was meaningless.
Well, okay, and I don't disagree that it was. Oh, I see. So, like in the episode, there was a reason he gave it to her in the episode, but you're just saying, why show that if she doesn't?
Right.
Interesting.
Right. So
now, it might just be hers.
Well, it is hers technically, and so
well, right, he gave it to her.
Yes. Are they? You know, is she going to pull a fast one on him, or is something else weird going to happen? You know,
interesting.
So yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss about the other players before we move on to our regular segment?
I just want to say that rotisserie chicken disappointed me greatly.
I know, and you posted that. You tweeted that, and Bruce is there saying it was huge. And it's like,
but it wasn't. And I guess maybe if you haven't eaten in like forever, then it would be. But it was like when they first showed it, I was like, oh my God, that's a ginormous bird. And then they came walking in and then I saw how tiny it was. And I was like, it's like a Hannaford chicken. Like you buy those little rotisserie chickens in like the plastic containers that everyone makes fun of. It was like one of those. I mean, yes, they got chicken and that's great. But I was really quite taken aback by how tiny it was.
I mean, to be fair, there were only 3 of them. You know,
sure. But how many times have we seen these massive spreads when there's only like 2 people or 3 people eating, and here there's a little tiny chicken. Rip it apart, have fun. Which rotisserie chickens are delicious. I'm not discounting that, but it was tiny.
Yeah, well, Bruce disagrees with you, and he was there.
I know he got it, and you know what? I'm sure that was probably like the most food he's eaten in a long time. So of course it
Yes.
was a lot.
Yes.
But I did appreciate him coming to the defense of the small rotisserie chicken.
Defense of the chicken. Yes. All right. Well, it's
Anywho.
time for our Jeff Probst is wrong about blank segment. And I saved something that I know both of us wanted to yell about right away in this episode. And people were
Mm.
probably surprised we haven't already. So let me do that now. Jeff, stop taking away people's votes.
Yes, I agree. Please, I completely agree with that
It's
argument,
the
sentiment,
whole
yelling.
point of the game.
Yeah.
Jeff is obsessed with this, and I don't know why. It needs to stop.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's this idea that they want to keep changing the game so you don't know what's going to happen, and they want to add advantages, take advantages away, do all these new tricks and everything. And I feel like this was another one of those like, oh, here's an idea, let's try this. It's fine if you want to try it once,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
Well, just hear me out, because it's like the hourglass, right? The hourglass was terrible. They tried it, it was awful, it was a terrible, terrible idea. They learned a little bit. You would think that they would not keep pushing this let's take people's votes away agenda, and now we're up to we're going to take 3 people's votes
Yeah.
away, which is insane when you're at 9, because that is truly a moment in the game that we have seen in so many other seasons where a shift happens. This is where people can kind of rally the numbers, and there's the vote at 9, vote at 8 are usually very significant votes. And now you're taking 3 people's vote away from them. It's just, and not to mention, was there anything else? And I'm just trying to remember. There wasn't anything weird happening with anyone else's vote, right? Because everyone else didn't
Right.
have any weird advantage that took anything away.
Right.
So at least, there was that. But yeah, you are not allowing them to play the game the way that the game was meant to be played.
Yeah. And I mean, there were even worse parts about this that didn't happen. Like, someone could have thrown the whole challenge for those 3. Someone could have forced those, 2 other people to lose their votes. If they had organized in a way, I mean, they could have done it anyway. They could have just said, oh, well, as it turns out, if I sit down right here, we'll lose, and suddenly my group will have the majority, or, something like that. And I mean, the other thing that's really bad is if they wanted to target Bruce and ensure that they really did flush that idol, Julie could have just, thrown the whole thing.
Yeah, but Julie was very concerned about because here's the other thing, is they didn't know how it was going to necessarily change things in tribal council until they got there, right? Because Julie was concerned that what if they end up having to go to like 3 separate tribal councils, and then there's only 3 people
No,
voting,
but
and
I'm
what is
saying
that going to look like?
after it was announced, after Jeff announced it, she could have just said, okay, I'm going to throw this. Bruce will lose, and then we can flush his idol out. And I mean, they didn't, as far as we saw, none of that happened, but it could have. And if this ever happens again, you better believe players will be ready for it. Not next season, because they won't have seen it yet, but after that. And it's just, don't take people's votes away. Stop it. It's one thing if it's their decision.
Yes.
Like if someone picks up a beware advantage, well, as much as I hate it, if they pick up a beware advantage, okay, they know they're risking their vote.
Right. Exactly.
They showed up at a challenge and have no choice in the matter.
Yes. And that is something that I think we might have mentioned last week too.
Yes.
The same thing like the shot in the dark, where that's your choice. And there's a much different component to this game when it's your choice, where you actually are weighing the options. What's going to matter now? My vote, or the potential 1 in 6 shot that I'm going to be saved, or that this advantage might have something great on the other side, so I'm willing to risk my vote. You have an opportunity to think about it. You have an opportunity to have a say in your own game. This is just taking that away. It's completely taking away the ability for you to choose, and also it's negatively affecting any plans that were in place going into the challenge. And the way that they ended up breaking everybody down was interesting, because they didn't stick with, alliances. It was more of
Mhm.
a, we want to break everybody up by strength. So that at least,
Well, and so that Drew was in the best position. I mean, his suggestions helped do it. So it's like, okay, I want to be in a good position when this all
oh,
happens.
sure. Right. But at least then it was people were kind of split amongst the three groups as
Right.
opposed to, being together.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, if we had 3 Reba all together and all 3 lost their votes, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what they were going for. I think, like so many other twists, this is meant to stir things up.
Mm,
And it reminds me a lot of the Big Brother twists because, in theory, they look like they could shake things up if there were like a large alliance controlling the outcome.
mhm.
But instead, they inevitably cause more conservative gameplay, which is the opposite
Yes.
of what Jeff claims to want. And
Mhm.
in this particular instance, we had a situation where Emily was realizing her position, saw that it might not be so great. And if she hadn't lost her vote, it's possible she might have actually been able to do something about it. Emily even
Mhm.
said that herself. But instead, we got a 7-person vote with 4 Reba voting.
Right.
Great job making sure things got mixed up there, Jeff. Really
Mhm.
good.
Yeah.
So it becomes a simple pagong type vote.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the opposite of a good twist.
Yes. I don't disagree. So, let's not do that again, Jeff. Okay?
No,
Okay.
no.
Thanks.
All right. Of course, I have a few other thoughts that I have or will be putting on TikTok, so you can check those out at David Bloomberg TV. And before we see how Kendra did, we do need to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a shorter and much more colorful version in poster form.
Yes.
Go to robhaswebsite.com/YXLostFeed, scroll down to the poster and click it and buy it. And it will be sent to you, and then you can hang it.
That's right.
And so, in addition to the poster, you can scroll down to the T-shirt and scroll down to the checklist T-shirt. Now, there was an RHAP Black Friday sale going on. I don't know if it's still going on as of now, but check into that. Look on the RHAP um, uh, uh, social media to see if it's how long it goes, depending on when you're watching this. That applies to the T-shirts. So definitely check that out and buy one for everyone on your list.
That's right. It's a great present idea.
It is. It is.
Mhm.
If we do say so ourselves, and we are completely unbiased.
Totally.
Mhm. All right. Well, Kendra didn't come in as someone who struck me as super strategic. And the way she played reinforced that. Did it finally catch up with her? Was she targeted for not playing enough? Or did she somehow end up with a mirror image of scheming too much? In a tribal
Ooh.
council where only 7 of the 9 players could vote, how did they all end up focused on her? It's time to figure out why Kendra lost. And I've already shocked Jessica just
I
in the
know,
intro.
that was quite the intro. I love
Mm.
that.
All right. The first and most important rule is to scheme and plot. And I feel like Kendra was doing some of this, but like I just said, wasn't exactly a super strategic person.
Mm.
Her first ally was Kelly, but as she described it at Tribal Council this week, Kelly was her first friend
Friend.
in the
Yes.
game. And you could certainly be both, but it seems like Kendra leaned more on the friend aspect and less
Mm,
on the
mhm.
strategy. Now,
Yeah.
we saw a different side of that when she immediately wanted to target Jake because he's a lawyer and therefore must be smart, which we discussed earlier. But,
Those
you
damn
know,
lawyers.
yeah, some people might actually want to align with smart people to help them. But
Right.
if Bello had gone to the first tribal council, it seems from the interviews we've gotten that Jake might indeed have been the target just for that reason, though, of course, Bruce got ahead of him on the chopping block order after that. But the point is, it wasn't like she was targeting Jake because of some grand strategic reason. Rather, it's
Mm.
because how she felt. She felt
Yeah.
he must be smart. compare this to Katura, who saw what Kendra was doing and jumped on it to help insulate herself.
Yeah.
That was strategy. And you may say, well, why was Kendra pointing it out not strategy and Katura jumping on it strategy? Kendra did it for non-strategic reasons. Katura did it for strategic reasons.
And wasn't there also a component to Kendra's decision where she was hoping that she could work with the women? So it was
Yeah.
Kelly, but so there was also that other angle to it as well.
Yes. Yes.
So I feel like she had a bit of a reason, but yes, it wasn't one. It was very similar to, like, it wasn't the salesperson that we saw.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Where, yeah, where it's like you find a reason that someone has to go home, whether or not it necessarily makes sense for the game is head scratching. And I know that people have often looked at, if you're a lawyer, then you can't be
Mhm.
trusted, or you're going to be, you're too
I
smart. We
mean,
can't
that
have
that
them in the
part's true.
game.
The can't be
That
trusted
is
part is true.
not
Yeah.
true. Not
Um,
true. Not true. We can all be trusted. But I will
you
say
can't all.
that,
I can guarantee you can't all be trusted.
okay,
But yeah.
some of us can be
Yeah.
trusted, all right?
Okay. Okay.
But I do think that it was a little too quick for her to make assumptions as far as Jake was concerned, and how that was necessarily going to affect his game, because I think we've now seen professions don't really matter anymore on Survivor. They used to have much more of a significant component to why people, or how people
Mhm.
played and how people voted and things that they focused on. But I don't feel like it's as significant anymore, even though we do have multiple lawyers this season who are not admitting to being lawyers, rightfully
Mhm.
so, because it's a
Right.
risk that you take. But yeah, I do think that Kendra was more, and I'm not jumping ahead, but it was a little more emotional than it was strategic.
Well, and that's exactly it. Because you compared it to Cody bringing up a salesperson. But the
Hmm.
thing was, he did that on purpose for strategic reasons.
Right.
I mean, yes, it was used for strategic reasons, but I don't think Kendra was sitting there going, "Oh, I'm going to put the target on him." It was just, how she felt.
Yeah. And I think that that's also why she wanted to work with the women, because she
Right.
was also more, had the desire to have that relationship. So I think a lot of the decisions she was making were not necessarily coming from a strategic place, but more of a feeling place. How does it make her
Yes.
feel, as opposed to how does she think it's going to work in her game long term?
Yeah, and we've heard about the day one twist where she went to Lulu's camp and talked to them. And Brando said in interviews that, she came back to Bello and said she spent a lot of time talking to Emily and felt they had a good bond. So when the swap came, Brando assumed Emily would therefore be on their side against the Reba guys and talked about it being an unspoken agreement. Now, we
Mm,
said at the time that you should never assume anything unspoken. I mean, you half the time can't assume anything spoken, but especially unspoken.
mm.
And he, said in his interviews that he should have talked to and promised her more. And I think we have to say the same thing about Kendra as well. Even though she wasn't voted out back then, she was blindsided. And that process led to the start of Reba dominating and Bello being picked off. Could she and Brando have prevented that and really changed the whole tenor of the game by
Mm.
having, more or deeper discussions with Emily? We'll never know for sure, but it couldn't have hurt.
That's fascinating, because it really, I think, shows almost how surface level the relationships that she was forming were. I think that really supports this idea that Kendra was going into this game with more of a, I want to be your friend, as opposed to,
Yes.
I want to play a game with you. I want to be an alliance partner. And I think that that dynamic right there speaks volumes as to
Hmm.
what her interpretations were of the relationship. Brando wasn't there when she was talking to Emily, and she came back and said, "Yeah, Emily and I formed a bond and we got really close." So in Brando's mind, he's probably thinking, "Well, great. We have a strategic
Yeah.
component here. We've got a number." And in Kendra's mind, it was more like, "I have a new friend."
Yeah.
And but it's not, I don't want to say that to be mean. I just feel like that's who Kendra is. Kendra is
Hmm.
very interested in that personal bond that she can create with people. And she's not someone who came into this game wanting to be cutthroat and wanting to take people out and do all of this crazy strategy. She really is about forming friendships, and I think she's of the mindset that those friendships will then develop into the game, like we saw with her approach with Kelly. It was,
Hmm.
she's my first friend in this game, and to her that meant the world. And then
Right.
that meant that she and Kelly were going to ride off into the sunset together because they were friends. But this is Survivor, and so, as you've already said, you can be
I mean,
friends
they
with
kind of did
someone
ride off into the sunset together. Uh,
just at different times. But
yeah.
yes, but you can be friends with someone. That doesn't mean you're formulating a strategy with that
Right.
person as to how to win the game, or you can be doing both. And I do think that was where Kendra just kind of left things off. It's like, oh, I formed a bond with this person, and then that's going to carry me through. When in actuality, that's not how Survivor works.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Then, as we move forward, they're at the split tribal council. Kendra had a perfect opportunity to strike against one of the people who took out Brando. But instead of pushing to get rid of Drew, she went along with the plan to vote out Sifu.
Mm,
Now, both Drew and Sifu were Reba, but Drew, of course, is one of the directors of strategy, while Sifu was on the outs and disposable from a game point.
mm-hmm.
Last week we discussed that Kelly indicated there was some pushback about going after Drew. But I think if Kendra had been on her side about this, they could have gotten it done.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. And I just feel like that's not the way that she was playing this game. And she wasn't the type of personality that's going to push for that, because she is very much interested in the emotional component as
Yeah.
opposed to the strategic component.
Yeah. Now, after Kendra was completely blindsided by the Kelly vote last week, all bets were off. She had no allies left. We might have thought she'd at least have Katura, but no, Katura abandoned that sinking ship and gave information to Reba about how Kendra was targeting D. And, Katura, for her part, acknowledged she'd be fifth with the Rebas, but knew that working with her fellow Bellows hadn't worked, so she was trying to save herself. Kendra also tried to turn on a fellow Bellow, Jake, and it might have worked if not for her just plain getting out schemed by Katura and also Julie, who, as we mentioned earlier, pretended she was on the bottom of her alliance and used that to get more damning information from
Hmm.
Kendra. She
Yeah.
just, when it came to the scheming part, she just wasn't very good at it.
Yeah, no, she's not a schemer. She's just a kind-hearted soul.
Yes. All right. Well, this leads us nicely to the second rule, which I think, is where in my intro there you got a little surprised because it says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Kendra was not great at that last part, especially.
Mm,
As we just mentioned, she told D's own ally that she wanted to target D. I mentioned earlier that the Reba must be doing a good job of hiding how tight they are, but it's still not a great idea to volunteer information like that to someone who had literally been publicly called out at an earlier tribal council for being too close to the person you are discussing.
yeah, that's
Remember,
fair.
Caleb called them out and said, these are a threat. They're too close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, plus, Julie further noted it was obvious that Kendra wanted D out. She wore it all over her face and body,
Mm.
which tells us a lot about Kendra's abilities to keep secret.
Yeah, and again, I just feel like this is just not part of what her personality allows. Where, it's one of those ideas where people come in like, I don't want to lie when I play Survivor. Well, you're gonna
Mhm.
have to.
Yeah.
That's just what it is.
And,
You're going to have to
I don't know
lie.
that she ever said that. I don't
Oh,
remember
right.
anything, from
And I
that.
don't
So
think she
that's
said that, but
right.
just watching her gameplay and watching how she formulated these relationships
Hmm.
and conversations that she had, I think in Kendra's mind, she was really of the idea that, well, if I share with someone, then that person will respect me because I'm sharing with them, and we're going to be on the same level. No, Katora, as you've already said, ran right over to the others and went, "Psst, guess what?
Right.
This is what's happening." And so everyone has a different kind of idea when they play Survivor and what they will and will not allow themselves to do. And I just feel like Kendra was someone who is just not, she's not a schemy person and she's not interested in hurting people, which is why I think we saw her cry when Kelly
Right.
was voted out. I mean, this is who she is.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't surprise me that she would be a little ignorant and think that, well, if I share with this person, they're not going to go tell the other person what I said because I'm having a moment with them. And it's kind of like the conversation
Right.
she had with Emily, where she thought we formed this bond and now we're really close. But in Emily's world, it was like, okay, well, we talked, and that was
Yeah.
great. But it wasn't strategic. And so I just feel like it's the same thing here where she just was thinking, well, if I have this conversation and I'm sharing, whereas Julie was doing it for a strategic reason, I will open up to her. She will open up to me. So clearly, this is something that they see Kendra doing, which is why Julie knew she could do that.
Yeah. And, you said she's not scheming. When she tried to scheme, like this situation, it didn't work
Mm,
out. And of course, that wasn't the first time she had this issue because she was trying to get everybody on board to blindside Bruce at the split tribal council. But
mm-hmm.
Bruce easily saw what was happening and told Kelly he knew Kendra was running around talking to everyone and coming for him.
Right.
So, you know, not exactly the secret agent 007 here plotting the blind side against the guy with the idol.
Right. And if it's not part of your construct, then yes, I think you're going to be very bad at it when you try.
Yeah, Kendra, don't go join the CIA. It's not for you. So all right, well, the third rule tells players to be flexible, and considering the conversation we just had, I think I know the answer to this already, but how do you think Kendra did here?
Well, I mean, I think she was very very bad at it. I mean, and this is, well, because here's the thing. I think Kendra was like, I would like to vote this person out, and but then she was also, it's is wishy-washy. I don't know if that's like the right word, but it was very, um she had an idea, but then she didn't really formulate a plan for the idea. And then
Yeah, I don't know
so
that it was wishy-washy. I mean, like, for example, with Bruce, she wanted him out. There was no
right.
wishy-washiness about this.
Okay, so but it's also like you talked about Drew, where she
Yeah,
wasn't, she didn't like stick with Drew, and when they were like, no, it's going to be seafood, and she was kind of like,
yeah,
okay, well then that's fine. So
yeah.
it was just this interesting place where she was like, I have an idea and I want this to happen, but I'm really not going to push to make it happen. But then over here, I have this idea and I want this to happen, and I am going to try to push. So it was a very strange dynamic to watch her work through her options.
Yeah, I also feel like she wasn't really a flexible player. She had her friends, and then there was everyone else.
Yeah.
Like, when she was trying to blindside Bruce, one thing he mentioned was that she hadn't talked strategy to him since the beginning. Now,
Mm-hmm.
part of that was she was swapped to the other tribe, but she, even when they came back together again, she needed to see that the Bello were trying to stick together and at least talk to him, not
Yeah.
just to Kelly. Kelly's talking to Bruce, Kelly's talking to Katura, Kelly's talking
Mm-hmm.
to Kendra. And, like we had said, she was the glue, but
Yeah.
that's why everything fell apart when they voted out Kelly, because
Mm-hmm.
if those two weren't even talking to each other, Kendra and Bruce, well, they certainly weren't going to work together.
Right. But she did come back around on Jake. She
She
initially was like,
did.
Jake's got to go. And then she's like, you know what? Jake's kind of fine. I'm okay with Jake. So
Yes, and that
it's
was
like,
the one part of flexibility that I also thought of was after he almost passed out and she talked to him. So here's the thing. If he had not almost passed out, would she have ever even talked to him? Or
oh,
would it
that's a
have
good
been like
question.
Bruce?
Right.
And so when she did talk to him, she realized, oh, he's not so bad.
Right.
And so she was able to change her mind, but she had to be pushed into that situation for it to
Mm,
happen. And then, of course, she changed her mind back and wanted Jake out. But of course, a lot of that was self-preservation. So who can blame her on that one?
Yeah, no, it is. It's very interesting to see the shifts that she was making.
Hmm.
But yeah, I really do think that it boiled down to who she was friends with more than
Yes.
anything.
Yes. And yeah, same thing with Jake that we just discussed. So the fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them.
Hmm.
Um, huh. uh, Kendra is an emotional being. She's not doing the statistics and the psychological evaluations to determine how people are going to act. She is, as you had indicated earlier, 100% going off of emotion.
Yes.
We talked about her saying Kelly was her first friend in the game, not
Hmm.
ally. Uh, we talked about just a moment ago, how she decided she could work with Jake after she had a friendly conversation with
Hmm.
him. We talked about her friendly conversation with Emily. And this is also what led her to try to blindside Bruce from the opposite side of friendliness. Kelly is there trying to hold them together, and she's out there going, "No, we must get Bruce." And you know, it seemed like she was playing on vibes while others were playing on strategy.
Yeah. And I know that she's been compared to Drew Barrymore, but it just keeps popping into my brain the more we talk about her. It's like with that like the flower in the hair and the way that Drew Barrymore would kind of focus on various parts of life. And I do think that wasn't Kendra into like astrology,
Oh
and
God, yes.
wasn't that a big part of it too? So yeah, I mean, I do think a lot of it is about it's how she feels,
Hmm.
and that's what it really boiled down to for Kendra. And so the emotional component of this game, I think, weighed on her, because for someone who is so emotionally vulnerable to come in and then play a game like Survivor, boy, that's going to be a very, very
Yeah.
hard thing to do, especially when you see someone like Kelly, who you referred to as your first friend in the game, get voted out, and you're literally crying when you're at tribal council because it was so emotional for you.
Hmm.
So I do think that someone like Kendra coming in and playing this game, it's going to be that much more difficult on her because she is so emotionally invested in people, not from a strategic standpoint, not from a I want to win $1 million
Hmm.
standpoint. It's I'm friends with this person and I had a moment and we bonded, and I took time to talk to this person, and now I really like this person. And that's more what it seemed to be the focus that she was centered on, as opposed to how do I win this game?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And as a reminder, these rules are all about people winning the game,
Mhm.
not about making friendships and having adventures. So, yes. Now, one thing emotionally that struck me as weird was that after Brando was voted out, we saw Kendra specifically say she wanted revenge on Emily. And so I've been waiting, and I thought something was going to come because otherwise, why show it? Why
Mm.
show that? But no, no. I mean, nothing happened there. She never spoke of it again.
Oh.
And it was in the episode, like, I want to get revenge on Emily. And then crickets. So I
Well,
don't
and
know why
maybe if
that was
Emily's in
shown or
well well, if Emily's in the final 3, and then she'd be like, "I'm not voting for you. Here's my revenge."
okay, that's a good point. I mean, I guess it could go that far. My gosh. Who else will remember that other than people like us who take
You.
notes on it and stuff? I mean, I guess. Yeah, I guess it's possible. That'll be
I don't
very
know.
interesting to see.
Yeah,
Um,
it will be. It will definitely be
so,
interesting.
but again, also there's the issue there. Even that was emotional. Three
Mm,
people voted Brando out in that situation.
yeah.
And it was Austin, Drew, and Emily. But she was
Mhm.
mad at Emily for emotional
Right.
reasons because she thought
Well,
that she had the connection with Emily.
right. And that's what makes it different, is that
Yeah,
Emily's my friend. And then Emily did
yeah,
this and that hurts my feelings. So now I'm
yes,
mad at Emily, which I've always fascinating about
Hmm.
Survivor when one person gets blamed for a groupthink decision.
When did
And
that
I
ever
think,
happen?
is it
Can't
weird?
imagine. Can't imagine why
Why
you
would
would
bring something like
particularly bring
that up?
that
It's so
up. I mean, you would.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah,
Why you would? That's so out of left field. I don't know.
I know. I
Um,
know.
hmm,
Doesn't make any sense.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, we can move on to the fifth rule, which reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. And as much as we have already discussed her game being mostly emotional in nature, I'm going to say, how do you think she did here? But on the other hand, you've already, actually, when we were in the first rule, you already started talking about this
Mm-hmm.
in a way. So, how else do you think she did
How
here?
else? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, she's a social person, and I think she wants to formulate relationships with the people that she
Hmm.
gets a vibe from. Not everybody, which that's where it becomes problematic for
Right.
her in a game like Survivor, because Kendra was, I feel, choosy about who she was going to create those bonds
Hmm.
with or create those friendships with, which is, you've already spoken to the fact that she didn't even talk to Bruce and didn't try to strategize and let Kelly do that. And so I feel like for Kendra, yes, I think socially she is an outgoing person and she wants to have relationships with people, but only those people that she feels something from, and
Right.
which then limits her social gameplay because she isn't like D, who is just formulating relationships across the board with everyone and including strategic conversations with those people. Whereas Kendra's like, I like this person and this person makes me feel good. So I'm going to share and I'm going to talk with them, but I'm only going to do that with some of them, not all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I do think pretty much everybody liked Kendra from a
Yeah.
social standpoint. Maybe not Bruce, but, you can't blame him for that since she did try to blindside him.
She
Um,
did.
but nobody was like saying she needs to go because she's super annoying. It's the
Right.
problem was, which you already brought up, she didn't turn friendships into strategy.
Right.
And it's, I hate to repeat myself or yourself, ourselves, but I don't think it's in her nature.
Right.
You know, we need to remember how she ended up applying. She hadn't watched Survivor in a while. And then the summer before this past one, she put on an episode before bed. She stayed up for 8 hours to watch the season. And in her pregame interview, she talked a lot about adventure, but not really the game itself.
Right.
And I think that's the type of person that we got there. She, had friends. She didn't have allies.
Right. Yeah, and I think for her, it was very significant that she created those friendships
Mm-hmm.
because that was what was going to be the most meaningful for her, which is why she probably limited herself at the same time because she didn't realize that by not trying to formulate a bond with Bruce, that
Mm-hmm.
that was going to negatively affect her game because she wasn't looking at it as a game. She was looking at it as, you said, an adventure. And
Yeah.
oh, I've made friends. And so I get to be on this adventure with my friend Kelly. And this is so great. And I'm going to have these people with me that I've really created a bond with. But at the same time, this is a game for $1 million and everyone is competing against each other. And if it's just not in her makeup to focus that way on this
Mm-hmm.
game, I think that that's what we ended up seeing is someone who was a very likable person and someone who got along with everyone for the most parts, except maybe
Yes.
the Bruce issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just overall, she was just someone who focused more so on the friendship aspect of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess we can, move on to the sixth rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. Now, an initial reaction might be if she wasn't really a schemer, she was mostly just being friendly, how could she be a threat? But we have to remember what we discussed in the first rule about her not being at all discreet about wanting D out, and that, leading
Mm,
into the second rule,
hmm.
Katura told the Bellow people, and then Kendra herself told Julie.
Yeah.
Needless to say, Dee was not happy about the situation. As soon as she heard Kendra put her name out there, she became focused, laser focused on getting her out. And it's understandable. You don't want anyone mentioning your name just in case. I mean,
Yeah.
sure, Dee is in the majority, but first, that presumes Jeff actually lets them all vote. And then, even, without the nonsense of him taking away votes, an idol could pop up. So it only ends up taking a vote or two to knock her out. So
Yeah.
Kendra repeating Dee's name was certainly taken as a threat by her, and she had the power to deal with it.
Yes. And that's something we've talked about a lot, that you become a threat to one person, and that can be enough to bring about your own demise, because now all of a sudden you become the focus of that person. And
Mhm.
Dee's coming with a group of people supporting her because she's got an alliance. And
Yep.
so they are going to support her. And whatever is a threat to Dee becomes a threat to the alliance. And therefore, Kendra finds herself being voted out.
Yeah. All right. Well, the seventh rule covers idols and advantages in game mechanics. And we discussed earlier how the vote removal took away the possibility of Emily flipping to the bellow. It's hard to say if it actually would have happened because there are plenty of issues among the bellow. Katura playing every person for themselves. Bruce having issues with both Katura and Kendra, or them having issues with him. Jake being on the outs with everyone, etc. But at least it would have been theoretically possible. The way things shook out, once Dee put her foot down against Kendra, everyone just lined up behind her to vote her out.
Yeah, and this, I think, goes to that the easy decision idea, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, everyone kind of seems to be getting behind this, and I'm not going to ruffle any feathers, so that's fine. Like, we can
Right.
all we can vote for Kendra, even though, like, Julie didn't want to vote for Kendra. But you know what? Why start a fight now? And
Yes.
so, Julie's in a very good position with the alliance of four that she's a
Mm-hmm.
part of. So why is she going to make waves if it's not necessary? And so I do think that that's what ended up happening. Is, again, it's like, if everyone can kind of agree and we know that we've got the majority, why push?
Right.
Four was all it took for the majority, because votes were lost, taken away.
Yes. Yes. Well, Appendix A, we can go to, which is about the tribe keeping their end goals in mind when voting. We talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. At this point in the game, it's still usually good to be picking off strong opposition. But for the Reba, it's really any opposition that matters now. They just
Mm,
need to keep picking people off. And this week it came down to Jake or Kendra. It was the right move for Dee, of course. And once she was set, the rest of Reba had to follow, even though it probably pissed off Julie that she was again being overruled. But there isn't much Julie could have done at this point. I do think she needs to make a move soon, or she's just going to lose at the end. But this
mm.
vote was not the time to do it.
Yeah, and I do think that, and we've already talked about it, but
Mm-hmm.
the people losing their votes took away any possible outcome other than, what does Reba want?
Right.
Which is not what Survivor is supposed to be about. It's
Well,
supposed to
it
be
kind of
about,
is. I mean, honestly, go back to Pagonging. It's not fun to watch necessarily,
oh, right, right. When I say
but
that's not what Survivor,
getting a
what,
majority and rolling over the opposition is kind of what Survivor is about.
yes. And so I'm not saying that is what Survivor is about, but in this formula, like in
Yes.
this, because you've taken away the ability
Right.
for, you've got 9 people, so there's a chance that those 5 could come
Mm-hmm.
together and say, you know what, we have to do something about this
Right.
group of 4 over here. But
Right.
now you've taken away the ability for anyone to do anything like that, because now 3 people have lost their votes, and 2 of those people are not part of that group of 4. And so you have eliminated the possibility that those 5 could come together.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, Appendix B is about the jury phase, but I don't think anything jury related really entered into the discussion here. I do think, and we've already mentioned this a little bit, if Julie makes it to the end with Dee, this particular vote could be used against her because it showed who had the power in the agency, and it wasn't Julie. So we'll have to watch for that.
Yeah. The only thing that not that this really matters as far as anyone else is concerned, but Kendra was thinking about who was going to vote for her because Kelly was now on the jury. So she was at least thinking about that.
She was, but she wasn't thinking about how to get there.
I know.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem there.
You have to get there first before you
yeah.
can start counting who's going to vote for you.
Yes. All right. So with that, it is about time to wrap things up. What are your final thoughts on Kendra?
Kendra, I really wish I could do a Drew Barrymore impression. I really wish I could because it was mentioned in her pregame, and I do see that not only from her mannerisms and the way that she speaks, but also just the type of person she is.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Kendra is someone who is just, she loves life, and she's someone who feels very connected to certain components of our existence that not everybody necessarily would feel connected to. But unfortunately, that doesn't resonate in the game of Survivor. It doesn't really carry over. You can go out onto an island and try to find peace, and you can try to go out and have connections with nature, and all of that's lovely and fine. But you also need to remember that you're there with people who are playing a strategic game, and you have to play the strategic game as well in order to win that game. And I think for Kendra, it was more of a focus on who do I feel close to and who do I feel like I'm connecting with. And she thought that that was going to win the day and that that would carry her through this game, not realizing or understanding that there's a second step on that ladder. You have to first make those connections and formulate those bonds, and then you need to turn it into strategy. She really seemed to be missing that part of it. And so I do think that she probably created some long lasting relationships, and she'll probably come out of this with really great friends, which is lovely. But unfortunately, it wasn't going to help her win the game of Survivor. So, Kendra she was fun to watch. She was very entertaining. And I do think that there were moments that we saw that she just was a light out there and just really super fun and a great person to watch on television. But her Survivor game was a little bit lacking in the strategic component. So sorry, Kendra, but you were great to watch. And I hope it all works out for you.
Yeah, Kendra came into the game saying she wanted to be seen as just being happy-go-lucky. And while that wasn't how she played all the time, it wasn't like she was using that as a cover for being some sort of super strategic game bot. Kendra played with her emotions. That helped her forge some bonds, but it also made her overestimate other bonds, such as the one with Emily, who is all about the numbers, not the vibes. And it also hurt her when she let those feelings guide her in terms of turning against people, specifically Bruce. Of course, another thing that hurt her was that she just wasn't great at scheming secretly. Kelly told us about wanting Bruce out, but it was a complete shock to Bruce when people told him that after she was gone. Meanwhile, he knew exactly what Kendra was up to in just a short period preceding the split tribal council. So that's a contrast between these two players. If I had to guess, I would say with Kendra, it was probably similar to what happened later on when Julie talked about Kendra wearing all over her face and body what she wanted to do. That later time was when she talked about wanting to target Dee and talked about it to at least several people, including one of Dee's closest allies. Clearly, Kendra did not have a strategic read on where various people stood. Even if we acknowledge that the Reba are apparently doing a very good job of hiding how tight they are, players still need to realize what's going on. And it wasn't just happening with Kendra. It might seem like that doesn't matter since the Reba are in control anyway. But Katurah saw it and used it to her advantage while Kendra walked right into making herself more of a target for this vote. As I discussed earlier, Kendra talked in the pregame a lot about the adventure of Survivor and within her game about friends and relationships. But that's not going to cut it when you're playing with strategists who are plotting their paths to the end and eliminating any potential threats, no matter how small the chances seem that those threats might succeed. Kendra just got outplayed. And that is why Kendra lost.
There we are.
There we are. There we go. All right.
Boy,
Well,
we
before
went quick on this one.
we did, well, I saw my notes and knew it was going to be quick. And part of it is we don't have the interviews to talk about,
Right.
so that's missing a few things. Part of it is, as we discussed, and I don't mean to rub salt in a wound, but there wasn't much strategy going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know. All right. Well, we can, before we get to our predictions, let me remind everyone that the rules that we just discussed are available in poster form and in t-shirt form and in t-shirt checklist form. Now, you may have noticed during this podcast, if you're watching us, that Jessica is wearing the checklist and I am wearing the poster, although it's on a very dark sweatshirt, so it's a little harder to see. And we don't do the sweatshirts anymore. So, but hey, still pretty cool, right?
It is very cool.
But you, of course, you can go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed to click on these and, order any of them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how else can people reach us?
Oh, I never remember where we're going next. So if you are interested, I am at Jessica Lewis 89 on Twitter, and David is at David Bloomberg. David does much more tweeting than I do throughout the week, but we both live tweet during the episodes. And also, David Bloomberg is a bit of a social media guru at this point and does have an entire page at his link tree where you can find all of the content that he is putting out there, both on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. He's just everywhere, aren't you, David?
I am everywhere. And yes, the link tree is linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE. You can also find me on most text-based social media like Twitter and Blue Sky is at David Bloomberg. The video platforms that you just mentioned, I'm at David Bloomberg TV. And I've been posting these days, now that Big Brother is gone, pretty much 3 videos per day. I decreased it for Thanksgiving. I didn't want to overwhelm people. Or I didn't want to overwhelm myself. One of the two. But yeah, we've got Survivor, we've got the Traders Canada, we've got Survivor UK. I did an Amazing Race one, House of Villains, although they took Thanksgiving off. So yes, you'll get a variety of videos from different shows. And so you can find all those on the TikTok and Instagram and YouTube pages. As far as other shows, that's not the only place that I'm dealing with them, because while I may be done with Big Brother Why Blank Lost podcasting, but I'm still recapping the Traders Canada at the Tradar podcast, which is spelled TRAIDAR, which is on your usual podcast host or as audio on YouTube. And I'm also podcasting there about Survivor UK with a co-host who lives in the UK and has never seen Survivor before. So he is literally the target audience for Survivor UK. So we get this viewpoint that's a lot different than, if you and I were watching it or other very experienced Survivor viewers.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to compare our views when we do that.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating. Look at you. You are just all over the place.
Yes.
David Bloomberg's taken over.
I don't know about that. Now we can move to our predictions. And the big question in the preview seems to be, will Emily turn on the Rebus? The problem is, presuming Jeff doesn't take away votes again, this is going to be an 8-person vote.
Yeah.
So even if Emily could somehow wrangle Jake and Bruce and Katurah to all work together with her, that's a 4-4 tie. Mm-hmm. They would either need Bruce to use his idol on whoever the Rebas are targeting, or they would have to pull a Reba to their side, probably Julie. The former is more likely, because if Emily can pretend to still be with the Rebas, find out the target, tell Bruce could play the idol, and they could vote out a Reba. But there's one huge presumption in here, and that is that all those people can work together. And
Mm,
I just cannot see it. I do not think Bruce and Katura will work together. And I do not think Bruce will use his idol on anyone but himself.
no, he will not use it on anyone but himself. Yeah.
So, with everything that I just said, I think this is going to be a straightforward pagonging vote. Either Bruce wins immunity again and isn't available, or else he plays his idol and they flush it out. And either way, your winner pick finally gets voted out.
No, it will not be Jake. Well, and you know why it won't be Jake?
Why won't
Because there's
it be
no
Jake?
reason to vote Jake out.
I mean,
Jake will
he's
do
not a Reba.
well, okay, but Jake will go along with whatever he is told at this point and who he needs
Well,
to vote for.
so will Katura, so will Bruce. And in the meantime, we saw Jake having an argument with Drew and Drew
But
complaining about him.
what? Okay, but let's just play out your little
Fantasy
story that you just
story. Yes.
the little fantasy that you just created with Emily, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we are to look at the group of potential people who could turn on Reba and make something happen, who's the one person that has all of the information? It's Emily, right?
Yeah.
And so if anyone is going to be a potential threat to cause issues for Reba, it's going to be Emily. So I don't see Bruce playing an idol for
Hmm.
Emily at all. So she would be the safest person to put votes on because he's certainly not going to be passing Emily his idol. And she has no connections besides the people from Reba who she's clearly had some discussions with, and she wanted to do what? Vote out one of the Reba, right? She was like, what about D?
Yeah.
So she's
But then,
also doing the same thing.
yeah. I mean, the thing is, Austin in his confessionals there still said, I still want to keep both of them here. I want to, stay close to D and stay close to Emily. So
Well,
unless
and
she outwardly does something beyond just asking a question, I think that she's safe. Why vote? So,
mm,
it goes back to the issue of we discussed it a couple weeks ago with Cassidy. Why vote for the person who might be against you when you can vote for the person who is definitely against you?
oh, and I don't discount that either, but I think out of this group, Emily is going to be against them because of what happened when she was like, "Hey, I think we need to
Right.
look at D." And
But I
they
don't know that
and
Austin and Drew realize that. I don't think they realize how badly they performed in that conversation.
oh, and I'm sure that they probably don't, but Drew is smart enough to start putting together
Yeah.
who they need to be worried about at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they should be worried about Katora, but nobody seems to be worried about Katora because Katora is kind of towing the line and doing what she
Right.
needs to do. But I just feel like Emily is going to be that one person that if they are worried about Bruce passing his idol and playing it for someone else,
Mm-hmm.
Emily is the only person besides Katora that he would not give his idol to. So I feel like that's going to be a safe vote for them to make just because she's the only one who has also mentioned Dee's name. And what did Dee say? When you
Oh
say my
yeah.
name, you have to go home.
Yeah,
So
but
if
I don't
Dee
know that
finds
anyone.
out,
I don't think. Yeah, that's exactly it. If D finds out, I don't think
right.
Drew or Austin told D about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Um,
right now, for in their mind, they're like, we can deal with Jake whenever. Like they're
right.
not worried about Jake because Jake is going to literally do whatever he is told. They don't have to worry about Jake trying to wrangle a bunch of people and say we need to go take out
Mm-hmm.
Drew or Austin. Whereas Emily is someone that could do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it. But as you were talking, one other thing occurred to me. If they want to flush out the idol, do they need to split their vote? No, they don't. Because they can just act like they're voting Bruce And then when he plays the idol, he doesn't actually have any votes on him. So never
Right.
mind. So yeah, I'm still going with Jake. I think
Okay.
Jake's a
Well,
goner.
I can't go with Jake because he's winning, remember?
Okay. Okay.
So I'm picking
Sure.
Emily.
Okay.
Oh, really?
I said sure. That's all.
The attitude. I could
I,
hear the tone. It
there's
was the
no tone.
tone.
There's
There
no
was
tone.
tone.
No tone.
Oh, listen, I have a 16-year-old son. I know the tone when I hear the tone.
Okay.
Mm.
Now that was tone. All right. Well, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhaswebsite.com/patron. You can get all access to all the special podcasts that Rob puts out just for the patrons. And of course, you get access to the Facebook groups and the Discord and, just everything that's out there. There's tons of extra content and stuff. So check it all out at robhasawebsite.com/patron. And also make sure you're subscribed to all of the reality TV RHAP-Ups podcasts by going to robhasawebsite.com/RHAP-Ups feed and selecting your favorite podcast service of choice. You'll find us, the B&B, Survivor International, and then, of course, tons of podcasts on a wide variety of other shows and topics. So, again, robhaswebsite.com/RHAP-Ups feeds.
And we would like to thank everyone who does the editing on all of the RHAP content, not just for Why Blink Lost, but the incredible amount of podcasts that are put out and just so many incredible opportunities for listeners to enjoy all kinds of content on various programs. So thank you so much, Scott St. Pierre, for leading the charge on that, and everyone else who handles all of the editing on all of the content from RHAP. And thank you to Will from America for our theme song, which you hear on the non-video version of the Why Blank Lost podcast. And thank you, David, for today and for another, though later in time, podcast than we would normally do. But we had to digest all of that food before we sat down and talked
I
about
think I'm
Kendra.
still working on it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because we brought home leftovers. So,
Oh, of course.
yeah. Yes,
How do you
obviously.
not bring home leftovers?
No, I mean, you've got to.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, thank you, Jessica, for another great episode. We will see everyone in about 5 days instead of a week. So look at it that way. We may have been a little bit later this time, but there's a shorter gap between when you get to see us again.
That's right.
So we will see everyone soon. Bye.
Bye.